Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Entrepreneurship, the Mark of Freedom. My name is Winston Brady, and it is my honor to be here with Mr. Robert Luddy to talk about the nature of entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurship fits in with the single overarching goal that we have as a school at Thales Academy. As far as housekeeping details, this webinar is being recorded and will be released on our Thales Press YouTube channel and on our Developing Classical Thinkers podcast. That way you can find everything very easily once everything is said and done. Q&A will follow after the presentation for our Zoom participants, and you can type your questions into the special Q&A chat box, with Q&A being administered by Ms. Alexandra Stroud once the webinar is completed. We'll even have some time for Bob to provide some advice about a small business project that some students may have, so feel free to write down your comments, your questions for businesses or new products into the Q&A chat box, and we can see about giving some advice at the end of the webinar. Bob, thank you so much for being here today to talk about entrepreneurship on behalf of our students.
It's a delight to be here.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. What exactly is an entrepreneur? You know, Bob, in my years at Thales, I've heard you speak often about entrepreneurship. And it's no secret that entrepreneurship is a passion of yours, but the difficult task of starting and running a business is not an end in itself. And I've pondered the kinds of questions, the connections between a classical school and that of a small business owner. What connection could there be? And what am I not seeing that perhaps you are seeing? So Bob, could you explain to the audience, this is our mezzanine, but there's no cafeteria here. Why is there no cafeteria?
Well, one of the things that entrepreneurs do is to increase quality and reduce cost.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will say, well, that's not possible, but that's what entrepreneurs have to do when they come into a marketplace. So it obviously saves a lot of costs not having a cafeteria, both in terms of space, personnel, cost of outfitting it. So we made that election and it's worked out perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Every Thales Academy campus has a gym, Apple TVs in each of the classrooms, but none of the facilities needed to provide lunch each day. But why is that ironic, Bob, considering you founded the leading kitchen equipment manufacturing company in North America?
We think about, for most students, they want to eat lunch in 5 or 10 minutes and have an opportunity to socialize with their friends, take a little break and read. So it's not like you're going out to a restaurant and enjoy a nice meal. And it's much more efficient, actually, not to have the cafeteria.
Mm-hmm. And so I love pointing this out to parents whenever we go on tours, because the lack of a cafeteria fits in with that single overarching goal of providing the highest quality education for the lowest possible price for parents. And it's a goal, Bob, that you've pursued during your entire career in business, from building Captive Air to founding a network of affordable private schools, creating products with the greatest possible value at the lowest possible price. Bob, would you say that's ultimately the threefold goal of an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. If you come into the market doing the same thing that someone else does, you have to realize that that market's already probably saturated. So entrepreneurs have to bring a better offering into the market. When you think about Amazon, iPhones, Tide cleaners, and Captive Air, that's what they did, and that's why they're successful.
Mm-hmm. That's ultimately the threefold goal of the entrepreneur: to solve problems, to create value, and to bring something people need to people who couldn't imagine getting that item or that service any other way. So Captive Air, Bob, you create the best possible kitchens. And yet at Thales, you don't even bother with the kitchen, right? Because of the high cost they may impose.
Well, you might say that self-interest would say we'd put a kitchen in there. However, my self-interest in this case is to educate students, and the kitchen is irrelevant to that whole process.
Mm-hmm. So an entrepreneur like you, Bob, and countless other small business owners and people who take on that risk for themselves of founding their own business, an entrepreneur seeks to solve problems by offering goods for sale in the broader marketplace, but the nature of those problems and their solutions is going to look different from one place, like a commercial kitchen, to another, like a low-cost private school. And would you say your goal for our students, is it to develop that same sort of mindset, being able to solve problems and contribute to society in the best possible way?
Yeah, really, entrepreneurs, they're problem solvers and they're thinkers. And to be a good thinker, you need to be taking in information. We talk about being alert, paying attention to what's happening, making observations, thinking about those observations, doing more research, and coming up with superior solutions in the market.
Mhm. And we should also not forget that Bob's success in one venture has given you the ability and the wherewithal to undertake a huge philanthropic enterprise in Thales Academy. Given that Thales is a school and not a factory, this is a philanthropic enterprise on par with John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, people that spent great portions of their careers helping to found great academic institutions. Our school is an outgrowth of the success of one firm and Bob's heart to help the next generation take advantage of similar opportunities and also navigate risks. So that's ultimately the mission of Thales Academy, to help students become people of excellence through truth, beauty, and goodness, and excellence marked by personal responsibility and innovative problem solving, we feel is summed up in the idea of entrepreneurship. Bob, as we go on, to you, what is an entrepreneur? What does an entrepreneur do? What does he or she look like?
First of all, an entrepreneur has to have some vision of what they want to do. And then you have to begin the process of saying, how can I do that better than anybody else in the marketplace? How will I finance it? Milton Friedman came up with the idea of sweat capital, means you can start small, you can develop capital from your own labor. That's, to me, is a preferred way to go, as opposed to getting a government loan, having debt over you right from the beginning. And businesses tend to flounder early on. Here's one way to look at it. If you start a business, it's nothing more than an aspiration, a concept, until you prove you can serve customers and make money. So you might say, I just started a business. That's true, but business is speculation until you can have proof of concept. Oftentimes that's forgotten. So the focus has to be is proving that concept in the market. So what we may be a terrific idea to you, your family, and your friends may not fly in the market.
Bob, here on this slide, I've got a photo of an ocean-going sailing vessel, something from the 17th, 18th century. Because an entrepreneur, it's a French word as far as somebody that transports goods from one city to another. The word in English, though, used at that time was adventurer. Would you say that that's a good description of what an entrepreneur is?
Absolutely. But it's an adventure that hopefully is very rational in the decisions that they make.
I think that's a good segue. Entrepreneurs were merchants traveling from their homes, ports, city-states of Tyre and Sidon, merchant republics of Venice and Genoa, seaside wharves of London and Bristol, New York and Boston, to faraway ports. But they navigated those risks very carefully, sailing close to the shore just in case something went wrong. They could always swim.
And I should point out, in the early days of America, these ship owners figured out how to get there faster, unload faster, and come back so they could do more turns with their ships. They could make more money. That's the American spirit.
Bob, you originally showed me this quote here from Peter Klein, that entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled. Would you explain that for our audience? What does that mean?
Entrepreneurs are looking at entirely new ways of doing things. There's a concept called exit, which means I'm going to relook at this thing from the ground up. And I would suggest that anytime you have a new idea, if you were starting over today, don't start with the old idea, because you'll never get out of that loop. You need to think entirely differently.
And in the United States, we've had a long tradition of entrepreneurship. Bob, we tend to venerate entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, Sam Walton, and John D. Rockefeller for the way they contributed to our overall quality of life. We turn the places where business like Hewlett-Packard was founded, that's the garage there in the bottom left corner, or we celebrate the unique gifts such as Google's PageRank algorithm that has seemingly organized all the information on the internet and improved our lives more than we could ever ask for. You can type in a simple search query and pull up millions of results in mere seconds. At heart, though, entrepreneurs share one thing in common. They have an idea and they seek to transform that idea into reality so that that business can succeed. But Bob, having taken like so many entrepreneurial ventures of your own, how hard is that in practice to do that, to go from an idea to actually bringing that idea into reality?
It always takes longer and is harder than one would anticipate. So really, you shouldn't even get into an entrepreneur venture unless you have a lot of personal grit and you realize it's going to be way harder than I thought. I'm going to have to deal with adversity on a continuous basis. And once in a while, there'll be some good days, but there's going to be a lot of bad days. It just requires a lot of continuous thought and grit to say, how am I going to work through this problem today so I can be in business tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of small businesses that start fail.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them fail. Sometimes the idea is bad. Sometimes they just don't have enough capital to stay in business. And other times, the individual may not have the capabilities of solving these problems. And at some point, they just give up or they run out of money.
Mm-hmm. How we've seen so many people continue to undertake businesses, though. What sustains the entrepreneur? Because in the past 2 years, we've seen an unprecedented amount of new businesses being formed.
I think what sustains you is what I call vision. So if you have something you really want to do in your life and you're doing the appropriate studying, work, etc., that vision can take you a lot of way, and you can suffer a lot of pain and adversity in order to reach that vision. And I think if you look at Steve Jobs, he wanted to change the world. It wasn't easy. He failed many times, but in the end, he absolutely changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
But he never gave up on that vision.
In the past few years, Bob, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, and if you could provide this for our audience. But we've seen this trend of businesses starting, businesses failing, businesses starting over again on full display during the pandemic, when government imposed lockdowns and restrictions to curb the spread of COVID-19, saw an untold number of businesses being asked to shut down and put their livelihoods on hold. But in response to this, Americans started their own businesses in record numbers. For gym employees whose gyms closed, they started coaching or personal training or fitness classes through Facebook. And I'm sure you have your own stories of, entrepreneurs that turned the corner despite some sort of law restriction that prevented them from opening up.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if someone has a cozy job and they're making lots of money, they don't tend to think of being an entrepreneur. Some may, but most don't. So businesses usually start from adversity. Mm-hmm. Or from a new idea that somebody's sure that they can do something better than their current state of the art or their employer. Mm-hmm. So adversity spawns growth.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen that far and away in the past 2 years. In fact, 5.4 million new applications, as reported by the Bureau for Labor Statistics, that 2020 was the largest increase in applications for new businesses being filed. Economist John C. Haltewanger at the National Bureau of Economic Research said that the surge in applications for new businesses has been large and distinct, the highest by far in 2020, for which data is available. The increase from 2019 to 2020 in total applications exceeds 20%, double the growth rate for any other year.
One thing you should consider here is that, particularly in the last few years, interest rates have been very low. Money supply has expanded. So it's called easy money. There was more access to capital. That tells me a lot of these businesses are going to fail because when the money runs out, they're just out of business. Mm-hmm. It's better not to be in debt, even if it takes you a lot longer. Avoid debt if possible.
Mm-hmm. And so this trend was evident across the world, with other individuals responding to this sort of pandemic restrictions, starting their own businesses, but it was here on display in the United States more so than others. The United States saw the largest percent increase in the number of new businesses, 23% year over year in 2020. And we wouldn't want to ask ourselves, why did the United States experience such a huge increase in new applications compared to other countries?
I think that's an easy question because America is mostly free. If you look on the left side, Russia is mostly not free, ditto Portugal, Romania, and Spain. So freedom spawns innovation. And when you restrict freedom, you don't get innovation. Russians are very smart individuals, but they have a terrible economy relative to ours.
We do see this practically. There was one positive relationship between new businesses and the ease with which a new business can be formed. In America, for all the inefficiencies we could speak of, we actually have a fairly efficient, relatively, process by which people can register for a business, obtain a license through the state, obtain insurance in case anything goes wrong, even obtain legal paperwork through online services like LegalZoom and others that cater to new businesses. There's still a lot of inefficiencies in the process, but relative to other countries, the United States is in a good position. All of these factors streamline the process of establishing a new business. But beyond this, there are several trends deeply woven within the American experience that also contribute positively to the ideal of entrepreneurship, ideals we cherish at Thales and promote amongst our students.
Yeah, you might find this interesting. To open a private school in North Carolina, the only requirement is that you notify the Department of Administration and that you follow all state and federal laws and local laws and do some kind of standardized testing. That's literally how simple it is.
Mm-hmm.
So Thales could start overnight. Private schools can start overnight. You could never do that in these other countries.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, they don't even allow private schools at all.
And those are really on the part of decisions of policymakers that restrict the activities of people who are trying to bring a better service, a better good to the market. Deep within that American experience, though, we see a number of trends that have encouraged this atmosphere of entrepreneurship. And those would include the founding documents, our individual rights and freedoms, and the rule of law, as well as the idea of risks and rewards versus coercion and force. So first, we have a deep philosophical commitment to the rights of individuals and the rule of law. Our country is founded on the unique idea, an idea enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed with their creator with certain inalienable rights, chief amongst them the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's why at Thales, we champion the founding documents and America's founding principles, because they enshrine as principle and as ideal the natural right, one given to us by God, to take care of ourselves and our families. An individual may start their own business to take care of themselves, a restaurant, a cleaning service, taking in and washing laundry. The story of so many people coming to the United States with barely the clothes on their back, rather than relying on the state for their daily bread. There certainly is a place for the social safety net, but in other countries, ones founded on the principles of Marxism and Leninism, people obtain everything from food rations each day to shoe rations every few months from the state. Tragedies that we've witnessed in the past 5 years, like Venezuela, have come about because government officials have increased their own power by exercising this kind of control over a person's life.
Yeah, if you look at these countries that are coercive, have terrible laws, they're not free, everybody's poor. And that's the end game.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the United States, we have a huge delta in income based on a whole lot of factors. But even people at the lower end are much richer than these people in these countries where there is no freedom. So we could say we don't like the delta of income, but we should focus on the fact that most people are vastly better off than anywhere else in the world.
Mm-hmm. A seminar by Luis Ball from the Calvin Coolidge Foundation, specifically on the decisions in Venezuela that turned that country from one of the wealthiest in Latin America, with one of the highest per capita incomes, into the tragedy that we see unfolding today. We, in contrast, the system we've inherited from our English forebearers was that of the rule of law, a legal code that applies to everyone, from the man asking for money on the street to the president of the United States. The rule of law creates a system by which consequences, positive or negative, are meant to be applied evenly and equally based on the nature of the infraction and not the person who commits it. Part of what encourages a person to start their own business is the knowledge that someone with power, authority, and government connections can't all of a sudden come in and take the fruits of someone's labors, something that can happen in other countries with a less developed system of property rights or independent courts. That's the practical theoretical concern built into the framework of the Constitution.
If you think about the common law, it's been developed. First of all, we have our Constitution that ensures the law. We have the common law, which has been developed over many hundreds of years. And it's served both individuals and businesses rather very well over a long period of time.
As a matter of practice, at both the highest and the lowest levels, speaking to that, a system in which individuals are rewarded for their hard work, that this is the best way to encourage people to take the huge risks necessary to start businesses. And that's why we encourage students to take risks and be bold, to take responsibility for their own learning and complete each and every assignment from the lowliest push-up to the longest thesis paper with the utmost integrity of which they are capable.
Yeah, I always say be bold, but be right, which means if you want to be bold, think carefully what you're going to do. Don't do it frivolously. And if you make a mistake, you apologize. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And you learn from that mistake. So the next time around, your judgment's better.
Because we don't know what kinds of challenges students will face, but we do know that students ought to believe in that connection, that meaningful relationship between hard work and the reward. In a similar manner, the United States Constitution protects the rights of individuals to earn revenue from their inventions. Article 1, Section 8, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Our founding documents recognize that it is the individual, not the state, who is in the best position to promote this kind of progress. And the Constitution, which as a document limits our federal government, limits the ability of anyone within the state and its bureaucracy to unfairly and unjustly seize the fruits of anyone else's hard work. At an individual level, this is the story of countless untold immigrants who came to the United States for one reason or another, a story immortalized on Emma Lazarus's poem, The New Colossus, in the lines, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." And it is reflected in the story of countless groups who came to the shores of North America fleeing religious persecution or the noted and severe lack of economic opportunity at home.
Yeah, one thing to think about that all good ideas come from individuals. So some people think, well, the government spends a lot of money on research, and that's where all the good ideas come from. If you look over the last 200 years of the technologies that changed America, everyone goes back to a particular individual. There's something to keep in mind. It's not emphasized, but it's very important. So you as an individual can make a profound impact on this country.
Now, many of the things that I'm saying, though, the freedom, the liberty, the opportunity, the social mobility that we enjoy in the United States, much of this is marred by the reality of slavery in the United States before the Civil War and of segregation following the Civil War. These institutions, protected as they were by powerful vested interests in the state, undermines almost every word I've uttered in this webinar, or so you think. The presence of such injustice, whereby huge groups of people were brought against their will from Africa to the slave markets of North and South America, that the fruits of some people's labor were brutally seized from them. Black-owned businesses and neighborhoods were torched, looted, destroyed, and bulldozed because of the jealousy and the disregard for human life perpetuated by one group of human beings against another. I would argue that the reality of such injustices and hardships does not mar what I'm saying. That's simply not the way that ideals work. For an ideal is something we may not be able to reach, but for which we continually strive. We will not create the conditions by which all human beings can flourish by jettisoning the ideals, throwing them overboard, as it were, to lighten the weight of the ship during a heavy storm. Instead, we would create these conditions by which all people could have the opportunity to take care of themselves and their families by regarding the ideas and ideals previously mentioned: entrepreneurship, the rule of law, the inherent dignity of all human beings, as first principles by which to guide our conduct and that of our elected leaders as well.
Yeah, if you think about it, we live in such good times, and the first couple hundred years of this country were very messy. Slavery was a great tragedy. It's a bad mark on our country, but eventually we've gotten to a much better place. But conflicts among individuals never really go away. They've dramatically improved. And there's a book written by Julian Simon that said, life keeps getting better. So you can reflect backwards that many mistakes were made, that life was very messy, but you can also look forward to say, for most people, life is way better today than any time in the past.
And in fact, I would say that it is getting better, but as we continue to look back at these first principles And at Thales Academy, we ask our teachers and students to consider the vast landscape of history through this particular lens of those first principles. And such principles include natural order, an order that is both beautiful and rational; human dignity, a dignity derived from being created in God's image; moral philosophy, as rooted in the Judeo-Christian and Aristotelian tradition; and lastly, our intellectual inheritance, an inheritance built upon the great books of the Western canon, the kind of classical education we strive to implement each day at Thales Academy, that teach us what it means to be human so that we may flourish.
You know, in spite of a very chaotic world, if you look at these 4 principles, if you live these principles, you will have a very good life, and so will your family. Even though there's chaos going around all the time and there's things happening that we know that aren't right and shouldn't happen. So focus on what you can do and the principles that you follow, and your life will be very good.
It reminds us too, freedom is not enough in itself. We cannot merely give people freedom and expect them to make good choices simply on the fact that those choices are free. We have to help such individuals develop good character so that they can make good choices, tempering their character against the forge of timeless wisdom. These are the values and virtues inherent to a classical education, in which we want our students to develop for themselves. In believing that all humans are created equal, that we're created by a loving and wise God, I will strive to treat my neighbors with the dignity they deserve. And I would want to contribute to a system that makes it easier for people to contribute meaningfully to society and to take care of themselves and their families. Efforts that may range from voting for lighter taxes or working at a private school like Thales that seeks to offer the highest quality education at the lowest possible price and help students handle whatever challenges may come their way.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing when a country and individuals and families can just continuously reinvent themselves based on very high values that we've learned over 2,000 years. You know, there was a time that classical curriculum was almost rejected in this country, but it's coming back very strongly now because individuals and schools are realizing this is the best way to educate. Michael Novak, a well-known intellectual, said, there is no curriculum that matches the classic curriculum in terms of the outcome of the students.
That idea, thankfully, is not unique to Bob or me, the transformative value of a classical education. These are principles that are deeply woven into our founding documents, into the tenets of a classical curriculum. The United States is uniquely blessed to have as its founding principle a transcendent truth that at once inspires some people to endure untold sacrifices and keeps others from simply forcing them to do so. This idea, this principle, can be ably demonstrated in comparing the American experience in Alaska with that of Russia's settlement and the development of its own eastern regions. Alaska saw at least 3 major gold rushes towards the end of the 19th century. These included the gold rushes in Nome and Fairbanks, Alaska, and the Klondike region of northwestern Canada. Tens of thousands of settlers rushed to a land where winter temperatures dip below -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and which receives as little as 5 hours of sunlight in the winter. Bob, why do you think those settlers traveled and endured untold sacrifices?
You know, the people that formed this country were risk takers. They had to move to another continent to live. And when they got to the continent, there was nothing there except natural resources. So if you look at these people at -30 degrees with 5 hours of sun, you're seeing a tremendous American spirit to try to improve the lives of their families and their country. It's a beautiful thing to see. And can you imagine any of us today in that line in the Klondike with -30 degree temperature? I don't think there would be anybody out there. So our forefathers really created a tremendous opportunity for all future Americans. And none of us should ever complain because they're the ones that made the hard sacrifices so that we can have a beautiful life.
Migrating across vast expanses of snowy wilderness, for the sake of an opportunity and the reward that may accompany it. In contrast, though, consider the Gulag Archipelago, the system of work camps set up across Russia and Siberia. The Gulag was set up to exploit the cold eastern reaches of Russia. They arrested tens of millions of people with the intention of transporting them to these camps to build railroads, canals, or toiling in the mines. In America, the United States government was willing to let people keep the rewards that they may have found out in the snowy wilderness of Alaska. In Russia, it's not the case that the government was willing to let people keep anything that they may have found out there. So what they had to resort to instead was forcing people to go out there as part of this system of labor camps, the Gulag. Communist leaders of the Soviet Union forcibly transported tens of millions of people to develop Russia's untold natural wealth.
It's so outrageous. None of us could even imagine being in the Gulag, how terrible it would be. So when you compare these systems, ideally someday in this world, everybody will be a lot more like America, more free, and providing opportunities for everybody that just simply don't exist in most places around the world.
In contrast, a country like the United States could develop a region as cold and windswept as that of Russia, east of the Urals, without resorting to force and coercion. And for anyone that may be interested in learning more about this, I would recommend the book, The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who's pictured there in the bottom right of this particular slide. And of course, this sort of tension and this mindset is still at work in the world today. Pictured on this slide is a very unique map created by the Heritage Foundation called the Index of Economic Freedom, which charts the amount of economic freedom across the world as measured by values such as respect for property rights, the rule of law, and levels of entrepreneurship. The countries in red have the lowest economic freedom. They're also the ones that we hear so often about on the news, which are guilty of myriad violations and human rights abuses. Bob, does the map strike you as being odd at all, the link between political freedom and that of economic freedom?
Absolutely. And it makes you realize that most people don't have a chance. Even if you look at Chile in the green in South America, is now moving in the wrong direction. So it's a struggle for most people in the world just to exist, eat, sleep, and drink. Whereas in the United States, we have it all, and including Canada and Australia and some parts of Europe, although Europe is tending to be so bureaucratic. The bureaucracy basically restricts opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And often entrepreneurs can be something of the canaries in the coal mine. The canary in the coal mine, if you were in a coal mine, you would place a canary in a bird cage. And if there was some sort of dangerous gas leak, sadly, the canary would perish first, but that would be a warning to everyone in the mine that it is time for them to get out. Often, it's the entrepreneurs, the people who seek to tap those resources not under control, that these leaders with their totalitarian aims go after. It happened during the Russian Revolution when the Bolsheviks seized the small farm holdings of the kulaks. It happens today in Russia with the so-called oligarchs who reap their vast wealth not because of their sweat equity, but because of their sharp elbows and government connections. And while a communist nation like China may encourage business formation to an extent, they enshrine it into law that these businesses serve the needs of the Chinese communist state first before the needs of their customers.
Yeah, can you imagine if we lived in a country like that, that you could have the greatest business in the world, and you're seeing actually in real time in China now, where they're pushing out entrepreneurs, putting great restrictions on them. And long term, this is going to seriously harm the Chinese economy.
And all of this creates a positive link between economic freedom and entrepreneurship and that of political freedom. All of these are reasons why entrepreneurship and the kind of classical education we offer at Thales are interlinked, and why Bob says yes to parents who ask him for help in establishing new Thales campuses. Bob, you know that the opportunities that we enjoy here today may slip away if there's no one with the mind, the character, and the courage needed to make this world a better place, one problem at a time. And it is ultimately the job of the entrepreneur to solve problems.
Yeah, one of the things that reasons that Thales began was to demonstrate things could be done in a different way. And Thales has turned out to be a very powerful model, which will not only influence schools in North Carolina, but all over the country. So entrepreneurs establish new and better ways to do things. But the competitive market will look at it and eventually will do things maybe even better than we do. So this idea of competition and improvement is continuous. It never stops. And it's why we have a prosperous country today.
And I can speak for the faculty at Thales that we're proud to be part of what is a larger movement, a broader renewal and resurgence to bring about these values in the field of classical education, to preserve these values to the next generation. And I'm sure there are many successful businessmen out there who have attempted to do such a thing as establish a private school and other similar philanthropic ventures. I can think of very few successful industrialists who opened a school in the unused office space of their own headquarters. Pictured here on this slide is actually the first Thales campus here at Paragon Park in Raleigh, North Carolina, where Bob and I are recording this afternoon's webinar. John D. Rockefeller may have spent untold millions of dollars to establish the University of Chicago, but he rarely, if ever, visited the campus, lest he be asked for more money. So our founder is not just an entrepreneur, but a philanthropist, and indeed a grandfather of a student at Thales Academy. And you, Bob, invited a group of teachers, support staff, and students into the offices here at Captive Air in hopes of passing on the same opportunities that you had growing up to the next generation.
Yeah, I think one beautiful thing that we can bring to Thales is experience from a wide range of professional individuals that have become very accomplished. And one of the things in my career, I tried to observe people and learn from them that were very accomplished. And having those examples out there is really critical to the growth of any student.
Mm-hmm. That is, after all, the mission of Thales Academy, to learn from the ancients, to learn from people that are more skilled than us, skilled at life, skilled at some area of their job. We're trying to get as much wisdom as we possibly can, but we're trying to cultivate people of excellence through the pursuit of truth, beauty, and goodness, so that our students can achieve their highest potential, change their world for the better, and reach that state of human flourishing we in the ancients refer to as the good life. Or as Bob says, if there's one thing, well, Bob, you should say, if there's one thing we can do to make the world a better place,
it's education.
Yeah.
In its broadest sense, and education moving toward wisdom. Mm-hmm. That's a challenging process.
And as far as the entrepreneurial mindset, we're going to shift gears now so that Bob can talk about what the entrepreneur needs to be thinking about, needs to have at the forefront of his or her mind in order to take advantage of opportunities and to mitigate risk.
Most important thing is to be alert to opportunities, make observations. So entrepreneurs are making observations that other individuals are not seeing. And then the entrepreneur needs to take in more and more information. They need to experiment. They need to test and figure out how to come up with a better way of doing things. So there's a lot of talk today about thinking outside the box. I'm not sure really what that is. Entrepreneurs have to think very deeply and very long sometimes about what their approach is going to be, because ultimately entrepreneurs, they're thinkers, they're problem solvers. They know how to work with individuals and teams, and mostly they know how to satisfy customers. Those have to be passions, and they have to be implemented well. And it takes a wide range of skills. Most individuals don't want to be entrepreneurs for a variety of actually very good reasons. So it takes a special skill set to do it. And it should also be pointed out that very often individuals are working in the entrepreneurial environment are more talented in their specific field than the entrepreneurs themselves. Mm-hmm. So Mises like to refer to the entrepreneur as the maestro of the business. That brings in many, many talented people to achieve the goals of serving customers.
Mm-hmm. Bob, let's talk more about being bold, but be right. I've heard you give this advice on quite a few occasions. Playing it safe, you won't get anywhere. You make a mistake, practice integrity, and apologize immediately. Would you expand on these principles for our students?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. In 1988, the price of stainless steel was rising. And as around Christmas time, I started thinking of how can we provide the same product without raising our price? So two things came out of it. One is we lightweighted the hood, which meant we used a lighter gauge metal. And we ended up with a better product, if you can believe it. So that saved money. And then we changed the type of steel used. So we went from a 304, which is a standard stainless steel metal, to a 430 metal, primarily produced in Europe. So Europe's using this metal for all kinds of applications. The United States is not. We were able to find out about it. Those two decisions allowed our pricing to be so much better and our quality to be so much better that we became the dominant company in commercial kitchen ventilation. But I will tell you that everybody that we were dealing with, including internally, was against these decisions. Fast forward 20 years, the entire food service industry switched to 430 metal. It gives you an idea of timeframes within the market. So very often entrepreneurs come up with ideas that are just rejected by most people within an industry. And if you're lucky, you get a good long runway to grow a very large business. And again, if you make a mistake, you apologize. In this case, we did our research in that we ran test models. We figured out how to made the product. We installed the product, and we did research on the back end. How long will this metal last? What are the downsides, if any? We did extensive research, but we did the whole thing in 4 months. That's the salient point. And our main competitor did the same thing 15 years later. They're now a small competitor.
Bob, what about thinking skills? I mean, especially when it comes to founding a school and encouraging everyone to think more critically and to continually improve not only your academic and intellectual judgment, but also your emotional intelligence. Could you talk to our students about improving your thinking skills?
Yeah, one of the things that we do that's very common, if you look back at decisions you made 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, most of the time you look at them, things change, the world's dynamic. You say, no, we can handle that in a better way. So this continuous review of decisions you've made. Sometimes we look back on a decision we made 3 years ago and say, why did we make that decision? Well, we probably forgot what pushed us into it. So this continuous review, continuous reading, constant testing, debate, argument, if you like, are part of that process. And moving quickly is a hallmark of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are going to move so much faster than big businesses. For example, in current time, we're making a new technology called direct or dedicated outside air systems. These are big HVAC units. The top 5 air conditioning companies in the world do not make this technology. So you would say, well, if this is going to change the whole industry, why wouldn't they be making it? Because they're satisfied with the status quo. And businesses, as they become larger, tend to move into stasis. That's not where you want to be as an individual or as a company. And this idea of rapid decisions is very important, but those decisions they don't have to be perfect, but they have to be mostly right.
Bob, this I feel like is one of the most important ideas in being an entrepreneur, but creating value, highest quality, lowest possible price. Could you talk about creating value for customers, whether they're commercial kitchens, whether they're students who need the highest quality education imaginable?
Yeah, the old joke was you can have price, quality, or time of delivery. That's gone out the window because modern day entrepreneurs give you all three. Say's law is very interesting, and if you look it up, it dates back to 1803, so this is not a new idea. Say said that supply actually creates demand in the market, and it's how GDP grows. That's how an economy grows. Somewhere down the line, Keynes came up with the idea that demand creates supply. Now, anybody that's paying attention today know that demand does not create supply because we are short supply everywhere. Because of the shutdowns, there's a myriad of reasons why. So a new idea coming into the market, a new fashion, a new type of phone, a new computers, new cars are creating continuous demand. How many people buy a new car just because it's a newer model and they just happen to like something about it, where they don't actually need a new car? So Say was absolutely right on an overall basis. Supply creates demand. A new restaurant opens up. And everybody says, I'm going to try it. And if they really like it, they try it very often. So this is a very critical law. It says law. Supply creates demand. That's what entrepreneurs do.
And this is probably the best moment that we can end on, but the entrepreneurial dream. Bob, could you explain the entrepreneurial dream? Like, what does this mean to you and for the students that you're speaking to that you hope will take advantage of similar opportunities?
Yeah, my uncle was the first entrepreneur in our extended family, dating back to the 40s. So my aspiration is I wanted to be like my uncle and maybe even more successful. So I had that guiding light, but I didn't start this business until I was 31 years old. So it took many years of preparation, had to be in the Army for a period of time, but I never gave up on that aspiration. And I did hone my skills in my 20s. So I had a good subset of skills, but regardless of the amount of experience and skills you have, it's never going to be enough. So every day, no matter how skilled you are, you're right on the margin of being able to get done what needs to get done in that day. So what's the message here? Develop every skill you can, learn everything you can, develop high EQ, learn, experiment, make observations of what other people are doing. We go to technical seminars for products that we're never going to make and we're not interested in, just to figure out, how's that person thinking? How do they solve problems? And many times you get a little clue from that person that you can use in your own problem solving. So this idea of continuously learning, as opposed to watching TV, going to sports games, that's all fine to have some entertainment. But if your life is entertainment, you're not going to be a high-end entrepreneur. Your life has to be dedicated to learning and serving.
Well, everyone, I want to thank you for attending this webinar and for learning about the relationship between entrepreneurship and the values and virtues of a classical education. Right now, we're going to take some questions from our audience, from our Zoom participants that Mr. Luddy is going to answer regarding business ideas, business ventures, proposals. And Ms. Alexandra Stroud is going to handle that Q&A portion right now.
Hello, everyone. I am currently in the room, but you will not see my face. I'll just be a talking voice. But if you would like to go ahead and start sending questions through the chat box, we would love to take those. And I would like to apologize for the slide glitch. We will have it recorded and sent to our YouTube page so that you'll be able to see it in its proper format. So this is requiring you to turn your ears on and not necessarily have a visual aid, but you are listening, which is key. So please go ahead and start filling that chat box. I see that there are a few questions that are already getting sent in, so we'll start with a few that are already in there. And as we continue, please feel free to go ahead. So Bob, the first question we got was, Mr. Luddy, I'm curious, did you ever consider acquiring Bethlehem Steel in the 80s?
No, that would be considered vertical integration. And knowing a little bit of history, Nucor Steel in North Carolina became a major competitor to Bethlehem. And Bethlehem went out of business because Nucor Steel was so much more efficient. So we don't tend to vertically integrate, although futuristic, we may have to do some things like that based on the current state of the market.
The second question was, I'm curious, did you ever oh, sorry, she already asked that. Please go ahead and send in more questions if you have anything, Mr. Brady. Please go ahead and end through those. I'm going to add a comment that we received. It said, for years, the public school has been indoctrinating our kids. Thank you, Bob Luddy, for seeing this occurring and creating Thales. So that was just a thank you.
No indoctrination, no propaganda, just the best ideas of the last 2,000 years.
So we got a good one that's near and dear to your heart, I know. Can you speak to your new venture, Thales College?
Yes. When I went to college, I spent $1,000 a year. And if you inflate that to today's time, it's about $9,000 a year. But college actually costs today, anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 a year. So I thought that it's very unfair to students to be saddled with that much debt. So Thales College idea was we could provide, first of all, college in 3 years. So I spent 4 years in college. I wished I had spent 2 years. but that was not possible. But 3 years is a good compromise. So you go around the clock for 3 years. And while you're doing it, you're also gaining experience through internships. You're embedded with your professors. And the reason you go to college is to be with your professors, not to read books. That's part of it, but you can read books at home. The professors help fill out this knowledge and give you a greater explanation. So it's to create a new opportunity and saying that college doesn't have to include football. It doesn't have to include a whole lot of things currently in college that are very expensive. And if you're wealthy and you can afford to go to it, God bless you, that's fine. But for people like me, and we call the aspirational middle class, we don't have a lot of money. We want to get educated. That's why we formed Thales College.
And for any of those who are curious, we launch on September 6th. So we're excited about our inaugural class.
It'll be an exciting day.
So next question, what was your defining moment in entrepreneurship?
Good question. In the early years, there was many defining moments. The hardest one that's in my book was somewhere around June of 1980, we couldn't make payroll. And ultimately, I figured out how to do it. And I realized I've got to do some things a little bit differently here because we can't be in that position. But as we gained some success and viability with customers, I also gained confidence that we could work through the hardest problems.
Next, why did you decide to open Thales Academy?
You know, I knew many young people, and some of them did okay in school, but many of them really are going to be denied the American dream because they didn't have the educational opportunities. And it sort of breaks my heart because I came from a family that didn't have a lot of money, but we had a good moral standing and we had a really high emphasis on education. So I thought I was very sure I could provide an opportunity that would be superior to what's in the marketplace. And year one, when we started the Franklin Academy in 98, we opened at capacity, about 150 students. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty clear that people are willing to try an untested school by somebody who never ran a school before versus the current market. Well, that told me a lot. This market is very large.
Great. Thank you. Which books have most influenced you over the years as an entrepreneur and as a founder of a classical school?
You know, the greatest thinkers are the ones that have the maximum influence. So I talk about Clayton Christensen, Harvard professor on disruptive technology, Dr. Stanley Muma from Penn State University on the DOAS technology, Peter Drucker, the greatest professor of management, Ludwig von Mises on how the economy actually works. So a lot of people study economics, and a lot of economics is voodoo, but Mises and the Austrian economists, they know exactly how people are going to react in terms of incentives, how the economy works. So if you learn from the greatest masters and the greatest thinkers, it's going to give you a huge head start in life.
So this lady has an entrepreneurial endeavor. She says, I am a Catholic artist in Apex and I'm ready to take my products to pilgrimage sites around the world. I have been advised to form a board, but not sure at what point that should happen. Any thoughts? And it was great to see Mother Teresa on the walls in the hallways outside my son's classroom.
It's really not necessary to have a board. You can have an informal group of advisors, and maybe if you get to be a larger company, but boards will tend to have a lot of ideas. You're the entrepreneur. You're going to drive this thing. I would say you need people who can give you some financial, legal advice, but this is your thing that you're doing. You're going to figure it out, and a board's not going to help you do it. So we tend to keep boards very small and meetings very short and not too often.
This lady said, would you consider creating an entrepreneur fair for students of Thales to create ideas and present them to venture capital companies? Of course, signing NDAs before entering the fair.
I would say they're a little young to get venture capital, but certainly having forums where they can discuss ideas, knowing that most ideas aren't any good, but the idea is we have to generate a lot of ideas to come up with one good idea. So maybe some kind of forum. I'm not a large proponent of venture capital. It's to some degree the easy way out. If somebody funds me, if my idea doesn't work out, you lose money. We're seeing a little bit too much of that today. I like the rugged individual who does listen to any advisor they can get their hands on, but you have to ultimately be responsible for those decisions, and you have to make it work. The board cannot make it work.
And for that participant and her question or his question, there is at least there was an entrepreneurial fair for kids around 10 to 14 in North Raleigh in years past. So if they're interested, they could reach out to me. I believe it was managed by the John Locke Foundation and similar think tanks in the Raleigh area. So there was something like that as far as encouraging entrepreneurship and so on. Another thing, if you wanted to encourage that amongst kids, is the Tuttle Twins. So if you're familiar with the Tuttle Twins, they're a think tank out in Utah, but they produce these books that highlight and teach conservative Austrian economics, and they have a number on entrepreneurship. It got my kids very excited about starting their own lemonade stand. So,
all right, we are new to the Thales family. How do we integrate entrepreneurship and personal finance and investing into elementary curriculum?
That's an excellent question. We're actually in process of trying to do these things. So the first baseline is to teach good academics. And every year we're trying to bring in more enhancements. So you can count on the fact that we will introduce more of these ideas in the future and beginning every single year.
This gentleman asks, what is the most important aspect of starting a business?
One is to make sure you're ready to start a business and you're ready to endure the hardships that you're going to have to go through, and that you have enough financial wherewithal and capabilities to keep that business running. In the early days of Captive Air, I was running to the bank every single day so we could be in the bank and be in business the following day. And that went on for 7 or 8 years. So grit, determination, good ideas, being prepared to deal with pretty big challenges.
I'll combine these two questions together because they're similar. What was your biggest challenge in starting Thales Academy? And when you opened Thales Academy, what was your goal?
When I opened Thales, my goal was to have 25 campuses. The biggest challenge was to get these campuses open. And that challenge is more difficult today than it's ever been in the past. And also to select the right teachers and leaders to be able to make Thales a really good school. That's worked out over time. Because think about it, when you're changing an industry, you're hiring people from the existing industry. So their ideas are come from that point. Gradually you have to change those to say, well, we're bringing new ideas to the table. Like the previous question, teach them entrepreneurship, teach them economics, let them understand physical principles that will help them make good decisions in life, character formation. All these things take a lot of thought and time to bring to fruition.
And a piggyback question, I guess, for me is that you oftentimes see quite a lot of a model, maybe for private school, that they're online. What gave you the drive to say, I'm going to open multiple brick and mortar campuses instead of just one really good private school?
Well, the brick and mortar is really necessary if you think about it. Some people can do extraordinarily well as self-learners without much help, but that's uncommon. So the idea of being with good teachers, being around friends, and my grandchildren like to go to school because they have friends and they learn from their friends, but they also learn from their teachers. They learn a proper way of acting in the world. You come to school on time, you're respectful. So there's tremendous number of lessons learning. And I look back on my K-8 experience. I think it set the course of my life. Mm-hmm. We walked to school. We learned how to acclimate. We made many friends. We learned. I met people along the way. We got little jobs along the way. That's hard to do today. But there's a tremendous amount of formation going on that nobody's really thinking about. I think about it a lot. Even in the drop off and pickup, students are learning how to move orderly, quickly, and safely. These are important things in their lives.
It was wonderful. Right after we came back in July of 2020, you could see students had really internalized just how much they missed being at school. It was kind of at the time, 2020 July, nobody else had gone back to school yet, and people, it was uncertain time and so on. But the kids were so thankful to be back in a room with their friends again. It was something that they really, really missed. So that was a really special time, despite the fact that everywhere else around us, people were struggling to figure out how to navigate such a difficult set of circumstances.
And you think about Thales was open most all the time through the COVID crisis. Captain Bear established a principle right out of the gate. We are never closed for any reason. There can be a snowstorm. We're coming to work if possible. And it builds a esprit de corps, a work ethic that we're not slowed down because it rained or there might be some ice tomorrow afternoon. One of the employees called me one day and said, are we going to be open today? I said, well, here's the simple answer. We're open every single day. And there's no case where we're going to be closed. And really people they feel good, that I got up under a little more difficult conditions. I came to work and I'm happy.
I joke that I would teach under a tree if I had to. During the pandemic, when we were online, I taught under a tree. I had my laptop and my Wi-Fi, and you make it work. When we shut down for online learning and stuff in March of 2020.
Okay, so we have, I'll answer about 3 more questions and then we're going to go ahead and wrap things up, but please do not let that stop you from emailing Mr. Brady any further questions you might have for Bob, and then we'll make sure that we get those answered and sent out to you. But we've gotten a few questions about classical curriculum, if you could speak to our classical curriculum, but also interest in vocational skills and how you've incorporated it into it. So how you incorporate vocational skills and entrepreneurship into the classical curriculum.
Well, one of the ways we do is LIT, Luddy Institute of Technology. We're also introducing vocational skills in the 6-8 grades. One of the things that I've thought over the years, when I started Captive Air, I was an installer, so I had to have some vocational skills. It doesn't matter how intellectual you are, it's very important to have vocational skills. Even if you can fix things around the house, or sometimes you get tired of being intellectual and you just want to do something common, do the dishes, fix the HVAC system. And in the modern world, the people won't be there to provide all these services. We have to do it for ourselves. And additionally, it builds confidence. So we have a commitment to improve our vocational programs, and it builds confidence. Students will love it, and we're going to encourage them in every way possible to develop those skills.
We want to encourage students to be dynamic problem solvers. So regardless whether that's the math classroom, science classroom, they're reading a difficult history text, we want students to have that sort of grit and pluck that's needed to take on difficult challenges. And with household repair, vocational skills, it's just part of learning how to take care of yourself, developing that sort of confidence. So with industrial arts, it's an elective track that we're building this year at Thales Academy. But a lot of the programs is kind of a mix between, say, STEM on the one hand. So we're going to teach students how to build a very simple motor and some of the principles behind that, but then also build in some aspect of household maintenance and things like that. How you go about, fixing very simple household things.
And all of that speaks to that entrepreneurship, the things needed to build an entrepreneur. And just to piggyback off of what these gentlemen are saying, you see a lot of those things giving young adults, especially, the kind of confidence to be able to go start a little side job and have a lawn maintenance job or what have you.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a major intellectual. He wanted to start a website and produce these beautiful articles. And he said, well, I can't do it without staff. And I said, no, here's the deal. You're going to do it yourself. You may be an intellectual. You're going to do every one of these tasks yourself. And he said, I didn't want to hear that. But he did start the business a year ago. It's wildly successful. And he figured out to do everything to get the legal work done, get the bank accounts open, and get websites moving. He did it all on his own. He has some help from friends, whatever. That's good. And he called me a year later and he said, I thought you were totally wrong. And I followed your advice and I'm happy I did it.
Well, and that actually speaks to the next question, which is on the topic of trying not to get into debt. What are your tips?
Sometimes we have to get into a little bit of debt. Maybe we buy a car, but we finance it for a short period of time. So very short debt's okay, particularly when you're young. Earn money, save money, live frugally. Most people don't know how to live frugally today. I live very frugally, and actually, I like it. It's simple. So being lean and mean is part of the entrepreneurial experience. And over time, you may find that this is a kind of a lifestyle that I actually like. It's much simpler than keeping up with the Joneses or having to have all these new things. That's complicated. I don't have to spend any time on that mess.
And the last question I'll ask, it says, which I find very interesting because we do at Thales Academy, especially, we look to form the whole child. We want to make sure that they're learning how to be a dynamic student. So this lady asks, does having really good friends help or distract you in the long run?
Oh, I think it helps. Anytime we have friendships, anytime we're around people, we have the opportunity to learn from them. I can't tell you how many times that I had an idea that either somebody made better at the last minute or said, you better not do that. This is not going to be a good idea. I consider those people to be all angels, and I love every one of them.
It speaks to the values of a classical education. Aristotle in Rhetoric mentions like the definition of a good friend. It's someone who wants your good. So it's not someone that shares, all of the same interests as you. That might be nice, but it's not somebody that's particularly fun to hang out with, but someone who actually wants you to be better than you were when you first became friends with that person. And it sounds like these are the people that you've surrounded yourself with, and that we try to encourage people to seek out, whether it's, their peer groups at school, mentorship relationships, what have you. You want people that want you to flourish, that want your good.
And I think you can have good friends that can be distractions, and you kind of have to negotiate the waters of, especially as an entrepreneur, how much time you spend with those friends.
Pick the right friends.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good note to close on. Enjoy being with you guys today, and wish all these young people to be entrepreneurs and very successful in life.
Well, Bob, Alexandra, thank you both so much for being on this webinar, and just Bob sharing your passion for entrepreneurship and encouraging our students to go out and make the most of the opportunities that are given to them. I want to invite anyone on this webinar who happens to be in the Raleigh area to come to our Fall Classical Summit. It's going to be held October 7th, 8:30 a.m. Up to 1:30 p.m. And we have a number of great workshops, seminars, and lectures. Jonathan Yonan, who is a classical education leader, is going to be our keynote speaker. But we would encourage you to come on out and to meet teachers, to hear great seminars and lectures on topics ranging from the classical education of Augustine to the workings of the Federal Reserve and a host of other topics as well. But we would urge you and would love for you to come out, meet some of our faculty, and maybe make some new friends that day. They're in Thales Academy Apex Junior High and High School. That does it for tonight's webinar. Thank you all so much for attending. If you have any further questions, please email me at winston.brady@thalesacademy.org. And if you're interested in the unique brand of classical education that we have at Thales Academy, please check us out at our website at www.thalesacademy.org. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.